Objectivity, of, I mean, even in the natural sciences, you approach a problem from a point of view. If you're honest, you tell people what the point of view is. I mean, no scientist says, look, I'm completely objective. What you do is you say, look, here's my assumption. You don't have to bother saying it. It's implicit in everything you say, and everyone understands it.
That you have a hypothesis.
Look, here's my hypothesis, here's my background, here's the framework of things I'm investigating, here's the way I look at things. Others can compensate for it. Maybe they look at things differently, okay, so they know how to compensate for what you write. And when you're talking about public affairs, these effects are just overwhelming. Now, to pretend not to have that point of view is simply to be an extreme propagandist. Anyone who's even minimally honest will say, look, yeah, I have a very special point of view, and here it is. So when I appear, nobody doubts for 1 minute where I'm coming from, because I make it very obvious. And therefore, people can listen and decide whether they want to compensate or modify or look at things otherwise. And it's not that you can't tell the truth. You can perfectly well tell the truth, but you're looking at certain things, you're omitting other things, you're selecting what you think is important or what you'd like to be heard, and so on. There's no way not to do that. So in this sense, of course, objectivity is a myth in the sense of giving a neutral position. That doesn't exist. And if you're honest, you'll say what the position is. So the media ought to open by saying, you're now listening to the corporate media, which are presenting the point of view of the world as seen by transnational corporations and your sponsors and so on and so forth. And here's what it looks like to us from that point of view. And then listeners could figure it out. I think that's sort of what happens in a totalitarian state. So in Russia, for example, under Brezhnev, they didn't have to open the television by saying, you're now listening to the Communist Party bureaucracy tell what they think, because everybody knew that. And then you could compensate for it. That's the objectivity. There's a certain form of doublespeak and language manipulation and shaping of images and so on, which is pretty transparent. And sure, these are modes of propaganda. In fact, they're by now, rather sophisticated. So the public relations industry, which is the main business input into this, and is an American invention, actually, goes back to the early part of the century. It spends huge amounts of money. Last time Congress investigated, about 20 years ago, it looked like well over $1 billion a year, by now probably much higher, to try to shape, as they put it, to control the public mind. And they're interested in all kinds of things, not just making you have the right ideas on healthcare, but also just shaping your personality. So there's a huge amount. We were talking about ideology in the media, but in fact, the overwhelming force of the media is in some other area. It's to try to turn people into passive consumers, whose only interest in life is to pursue wants that they don't have. A tremendous amount of the media is just committed to creating artificial wants and trying to get people trapped. But just take a look at advertising. I mean, if you can convince a poor black kid in the ghetto that he needs to have $200 sneakers signed by a basketball player, if that's the most important thing in life, he's going to go out and get it. And to go out and get it, he'll have to do what is available, which becomes work for the drug rackets or, kill the guy and go rob the store next door and so on. And you have then built up a system of internal terror and control, which is fairly effective and destroys the societies. The United States is a much freer country than any in Europe. So, say, the power of the state to coerce is considerably less here than in any other country I know of. There's no way for the government here to, say, march into the offices of CBS and take their files as they can do in England. So there are compensating factors. One reason I'm a little hesitant about talking about it is that the United States is the only country I know of where there has been extensive and systematic inquiry into the media. That's not true in Europe. There's a little, but not much. And that reflects the fact that there are many more independent people here. Europeans like to think they're independent, but in fact they are so coerced that they don't even think of inquiring into their own media. They just take it for granted they must be completely free and open. You don't get to become Ted Koppel or Sam Donaldson and so on unless you've already demonstrated that you have internalized the values of the powerful. And once you've demonstrated that, then you can move up, and if you do your job properly, you'll move in those social circles, and then it begins to have an effect. So the kind of people you play golf with and you have dinner with and whose meetings you attend and so on, yeah, naturally, that's part of the process of socialization. It begins at a much lower level, it begins in school. You get into the right circles if you behave the right way. The right circles in, say, a college may be, the faculty club and the local elite and so on. You move along, it gets to be the corporate world, the literary intellectuals, the Washington inside the Beltway club. And these are very closely linked groups. They're all very privileged and wealthy and share lots of interests and concerns. And if you're properly behaved, then you can enter into those circles. But then, of course, you've got to see the world they do, or shape your picture of the world the way they do. If you don't, you're out of the circle.